welcome to the latest Moviescramble podcast. In this episode, we are celebrating all things underdog. And so in order to do so, I need to bring in the big dog. John, how are you?
Yes, thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. That's
You're so welcome.
I didn't know where you were going to go with this one at all, with this intro.
Neither did I.
I had no clue. But yes, thank you very much. It's very nice of you. I'm good. It's another week, and like we talked offline, it just seems to be flying in these weeks at the moment, and I think it's partly got to do with the fact that it's just wintry and dark, and the usual. So it's quite appropriate that we're doing a film that's set in the furthermost north than anywhere else.
Yeah.
So how are you doing? You all right?
Really good and super excited to be talking about this film. I have raved about this since 2023, and I'm just delighted that it's finally found its way to the UK so we can actually talk about it. So yeah,
nice.
Well, good.
Good stuff.
So in this episode, we are discussing the Icelandic football documentary, The Home Game, which has just come to Amazon Prime, amongst other platforms, in the UK. Directed by Smári Gunn and Logi Sigurðsson, the film centres around a tiny Icelandic football team. Back in 1994, Vidar secured a pitch for Reynar FC. The team comprised local boys and girls, all of whom were just eager for the chance to play. He entered them into the Icelandic FA Cup, desperate for a chance to put the turf to good use, but instead they were actually drawn away to golf club Grindavik, where they unceremoniously lost 10-0. 20 years later, Vidar's son Kari, who also runs the local theatre cum hostel, is determined to fulfil his father's dream. Reynar will get their home game, and hopefully this time the score won't reach double digits. So this film won the Audience Award at the Glasgow Film Festival back in 2023, so it was a bit of a crowd pleaser when it was on the festival circuit. Did this impact your expectations going in? I know I obviously haven't shut up about it, so I'm hoping that you weren't expecting something and that you've gone, maybe this was terrible.
No, it didn't affect my expectations of it really, because it was a while ago that it was actually screened as part of the festival. So it wasn't, I mean, you'd mentioned it a couple of times. You'd obviously mentioned it at the festival. You have done the review of it and everything, but there's been enough of a gap with it coming to actually being able to view. And I didn't see it at the festival or anything. So there has been a sizable gap in between all the stuff that was written about it and getting the Audience Award and all that sort of stuff, and actually becoming available now. So I was kind of going in quite fresh to it. I reread your review of it and I thought, yeah, I think I'll probably quite look forward to this. So yes, I didn't have very many expectations, because I don't have very many expectations with regards to documentaries. I think that's just the way of it with me, because they can be probably more formulaic than fictional films. It just depends on, again, it depends on the filmmaker, doesn't it, rather than whether the subject matter is good or not. But yeah, I was looking forward to it. I definitely was. What were you looking forward to rewatching it and re-engaging with it?
Yes, I have cried every time I have watched this film. It just really gets to my cold, dead heart in a way that I feel like other documentaries haven't. I think it's probably because I definitely feel like the sense of humour that's on display in this film is very similar to a West of Scotland sense of humour. It's quite self-depreciating, it's taking the piss out of others. So I feel like there's a kinship there almost that you just maybe don't get from other documentaries. And obviously Glasgow is a big footballing city. I understand that it causes a lot of divide and a lot of violence and a lot of problems, but we are a city that absolutely loves watching football, and so I really just appreciated it from that angle as well. So yeah, I was just looking forward to having an excuse to finally talk about it with somebody else who's actually seen it, because it's all very well me saying, oh, I've watched this great documentary, and then nobody else has ever seen it, so you can't actually have that back and forth. So it was nice to be able to actually just chat about it and be like, did you cry at this bit too?
Yeah, we've discussed this previously. That's one of the problems that you have when you're watching things at film festivals. Sometimes they just disappear off the radar completely, and you've seen this film that you think is absolutely brilliant, and then you start to doubt yourself because, well, if it wasn't as brilliant as I think it was, is that why it's not been picked up anywhere? That's why you can't watch it, But there are so many outlets for these films now that they do eventually rock up somewhere or other. And like I said, this one has just been available in the last week or so, the last couple of weeks. So yes, it is very strange because even though, we've both seen it now, I would imagine that probably most of the other people that have listened or listening to this or I've looked at this film are thinking, well, I haven't seen this film, I don't know anything about it. And why would I watch an Icelandic documentary? One that's apart from the odd Jesus Christ is not in English at all. It's, it's all subtitled. So yes, it's a bit of a barrier, isn't it?
Yeah.
To watch these type of films, which is a bit of a shame because you can get some really, really good ones as well.
Yeah, well, it all comes back to Bong Joon-ho. If we can just go over the 1 inch barrier, we can open our world up. So it's definitely worth it in this case. So the Home Game, obviously, as I said, is all about all things underdog. It's very much that sort of classic narrative. But I think that the story of Rainier FC itself is one that's really compelling. I don't know how many sports documentaries you've watched, but what did you think of this in terms of just like sort of the storytelling involved in it?
Oh, it was very well laid out. It gave you the first maybe 15, 20 minutes were focused on the background as to why they were actually wanting to have a home game in the first place. And they explained it very well. They explained the whole history of the football team, the fact that it was very much a community. The community came together in order to build the pitch in the first place and all this stuff. So, and it focused quite a lot on the father and then it switched to the son, Carrie, and why he was doing it. And it wasn't for any sort of glory or sort of making himself bigger than he actually was. Because let's face it, he was a fairly sort of big character in the town. I say town, it's more like a hamlet. There's very few
369 people according to the title card.
yeah, and he's still got a cultural centre there. Yeah. So it's amazing that was all there. So the storytelling it was fairly linear. It gave you the background, it gave you the build-up, and then it gave you the execution in the last. I think it was the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes was the whole the big finale, if you like, if you can call it big. It was all very sort of low key. Now, I had a wee problem with them using the term underdog because being an underdog actually means that you have actually attained a certain level, but you're obviously fighting against like people at sort of higher level, but they hadn't even started. Really, because they were starting from nothing. They didn't have a team or anything. There was no organisation. Yeah, so even then it's like sort of below underdog status. It wasn't even that. And it makes for a very good viewing experience because you're immediately rooting for them because it is an underdog story. And the way that they brought that forward and actually told it to camera was very well done as well. I really liked the way that it was kind of put together. It wasn't flashy. It didn't focus on one particular person over another. It just kind of took in everybody that was involved in it, which was kind of the right way to do it. And it was probably easier for the filmmaker because it encompassed the community rather than just the individual as well. So it was an individual's idea, but it was sort of the way they expanded out from that and the way that other people got involved. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done indeed.
Yeah, and I think what you touched on there's obviously that kind of father-son dynamic between Vidar and Carrie, which is kind of at the heart of the film. I know they do obviously talk to other people as well, but their sort of story, because obviously Vidar was the original team coach, kind of shapes how this film moves as well. And it gives Carrie more. It's not just like a personal investment of wanting to, reinstate this football team. It's more than just sort of winning a match. And I felt like that really lifted the documentary as well because it was kind of rooted in this sort of legacy almost of trying to, rebuild what his father had started, which again is no mean feat. I think is pretty amazing that he wanted to sort of take on that mantle, especially since their one and only game was such a thumping defeat.
Yes, I like the way that when they looked at the records of the game, because there's obviously a written record of each game, and they said, well, you lost 10-0, but you only conceded 3 goals in the second half, so it's almost a win,
And what I really liked as well was the talking heads, like obviously they interviewed the original team, and they were like, well, we thought it was a golf club, because obviously the team's name was Golf Club Grundavik, and it's like, turned out they were good at football as well.
Yeah, and they were embarrassed because they got beat by a golf club.
Yeah.
It's very good indeed. And they said that, they had to travel so far for the away game and all that, and you look at it and you go, it's not really that far at all. It's maybe only about 3 hours that they're having to travel. Football fans are used to traveling the length and breadth of the country to watch, to follow their team and everything. But yes, it was interesting the way that they kind of put that. And like you say, it turned out it was about the legacy, but it didn't focus on the legacy. It focused on like the primary goal of having this football match actually on their home pitch. So the legacy thing kind of snuck in there as part of that. And they didn't emphasize that very much, which I thought was quite nice, because that can take away from the main story then if you've got this sort of dual thing going on. And it was explained very well right at the end about what actually happened after that. Just a couple of title cards and that was it. So yeah, made perfect sense the way they did it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think is quite amazing in this documentary is how football is such a catalyst for community within Hellisander. Like, you get the sense that this is the type of town where, they're all doing these sort of very seasonal jobs. Like, you've got like delivery drivers, fishermen, clergymen, etc., that are all making up this football team. And you kind of get the impression that it's the type of place where, if you were short on something, somebody would help you out and you could always chap your neighbour's door. But in a way, football sort of underlines that as well, because everybody wants to be part of this. It really gives them a sort of sense of spirit about the place as well, which I thought was, as I said in the opening, Glasgow, obviously we love our football, but it's incredibly divisive. Whereas here, everyone was coming together and chipping in.
Yeah, there was very much a sense of community, and you get the idea that this isn't the first community project that the town has been involved in, and the sort of surrounding areas as well. It's not the first time that they've done something that has made sure that the community comes together and there's a sense of involvement from everybody and everybody around. Now, the likes of football, like I say, can be just certain types of people who actually watch and follow it, but you can do these things around a community, and it does involve everybody. And I like the fact that there was both boys and girls playing in the original team, and they got these regular exemptions and things back in like 96, wasn't it? 95, 96 they were talking about. And that was through necessity, because there was fewer kids. So in a population of 369, you really need to get everybody involved that can possibly be involved. So the fact that it wasn't just seen as a male thing, which football for a long time was, it's only really in the last sort of decade that the women's game has actually come to more prominence and become a bigger sport, and it's being treated in a far better way than it used to be. So the fact that they were doing that back then and it was accepted and it wasn't called out as being daft or stupid, it was necessity more than anything else. And why not? Why shouldn't girls play alongside boys? Fair enough that they may not be as strong and powerful as their male counterparts, but it's not all about strength. It's about agility. It's about using your brain, because they talk about having a footballer's brain, and it can be somebody who, when you hear them getting interviewed, they think this guy's as thick as mince. But when he gets out onto a football pitch, he knows he's got a sense of what he needs to do and how he needs to be part of a team and all that, and being part of a collective. And that's something that it doesn't matter if you're male or female. If you're passionate about something and you learn about it, then you are just as good as anybody else. So yeah, I liked that whole thing, and that was kind of underpinning it without them focusing on that particular element. It was just something that they did because, you know, you want everybody. The whole idea of community is getting involved in everything, isn't it? So,
yeah. Although I do particularly love that scene where Carrie goes to seek out Freydis, who obviously had, well, he thinks she's played at a national level. She says she was on the bench for the Icelandic women's team. But I even just love that scene where he goes to ask her to rejoin and be part of the scene, because it's so intimate. It's like it's over a cup of coffee in her kitchen, but it's so meaningful as well. And, you know, she seems quite shocked, quite frankly, that they would want her involved. But what you have to bear in mind is that previously you've just had about 2 montages where it's 40-year-old men who are completely out of breath, injuring each other and themselves already, and barely able to do like a bleep test, whereas Freydis obviously seems to have kept up with her sport and is still like super fit and ready to go. So there's that sort of notion that she could be their star player, as it were.
Yes, yeah. There's a very telling scene quite early on where they're talking about, they've got the first few people and they say, right, yeah, well, we need to start training. We have a year, you know, we need to get training. And one of them says, well, I'm not going to run. I'm not doing running. And somebody else points out, it's not quite the same as being on a 5-a-side pitch. The pitch is 100 yards that you have to be able to run up and down on. So you do kind of need to have to run. He's going, no, I'm not running. I'm not going to do that. And this is from guys who were previously part of the youth football team. So yeah. And I liked all those wee bits where they were talking. It was quite intimate the way he was talking to when he was recruiting certain people, and he was talking to the guy, and the guy was stuffing his face. They were having cake and cheese and all sorts of stuff. So it wasn't promoting health and fitness at all. They were just having, you know. And they interviewed one guy, and he was on a beer. So.
The scene where they're eating as well, though, he's like, how many goals do you think like you would let in? And he was like, right now, no more than 10. And I really loved that sort of, as I say, it was very sort of self-deprecating humour that was throughout it as well. And also when Annabelle, the Portuguese hostel worker, shows up, and Carrie's like, I mean, he's trained with Sporting Lisbon. You know, that's the same place as Cristiano Ronaldo. And he might as well have been Ronaldo. That's how excited he was to have someone with a little bit of fitness and pace about them as well, which again, just, you know, really sort of put into focus the fact that this was just ordinary guys. As I've said, it's like fishermen and, you know, truck drivers and stuff like that, who are out all week doing like hard manual jobs and then, you know, coming home at night to train in, quite frankly, some very chilly conditions. So that's one of the things that I think is used really well, is the fact that, you know, there's no getting away from the fact that the Icelandic landscape completely dominates. You know, they talk about the glacier that sort of overshadows the pitch. They're training in snow and ice. Their pitch is completely ruined. That in itself is quite an interesting element of this documentary, because it's weather and landscape that you'll not see anywhere else in the world. Yeah,
there's the whole thing at the start, and he says, right, we've got a year. That's great. We've got a year in order to prepare and get the team together. And then basically the country, from a weather perspective, shuts down for about 6 months, and it's dark and it's frozen. And they can't train on the pitch, because if they did, they would be cutting it up, because it doesn't recover then when it's completely frozen. They've been using AstroTurf. They've been using like the local school gym in order to actually train. And then they come to the point where they've got too many players to actually train properly indoors, so they're struggling that way. So even though that they have so much time, they don't really, because they have to be able to train on the surface that they're actually going to be playing on, because it's I don't know if you like, the difference between AstroTurf and grass is completely different. The ball moves in a different way. It's faster. And the way that you can actually like run and stop and tackle and everything on AstroTurf is completely different. AstroTurf is particularly unforgiving on ankles and knees, things like, which I have found to my cost, because I've done I used to play 5-a-side football, and I've done in both of my ankles at one time or another, just because when you stop dead on AstroTurf, and it can be quite unforgiving on limbs, especially if you've got
Yeah.
certain weaknesses there. So yes, grass is completely different in that respect. It's slicker, it can be slicker, it can be faster and all that. And obviously grass can be at different levels. Some teams they cut the grass and it's higher so that it makes the pitch slower. So if you're playing against a team who's like very slick, fast passing movements, if the grass is higher, it's not going to be as fast or as fluid for them. So just these wee advantages. So they work things within the rules of the game about, you know, the height of grass and all this sort of stuff, and the width of the pitch and everything. That all comes into it as well, because if you've got a narrower pitch and you're playing against a team who like to like lob balls in from the side, then there's less opportunity for them to do that because it's more crowded. Or, you know, it's all got to do with tactics and the way they work. So yes, it's important how they approached the training and the need for actually being able to, you know, train on grass and everything as well, and the ability to work together as a full team. Like if you've got 30 guys, then you could have a team of 11 playing a team of 11 quite easily, but you couldn't do that in a gym hall. It's not going to quite work in the same way. You know, working in your skills and working in your sort of team outlook and everything as well. So it was interesting, but it didn't emphasize that. It noted that as something that was part of the process, but it didn't really go into a lot of depth. It just let you to, if you wanted to find out something like that, then you could go away and say, well, you know, why do they need to do either or? It didn't need to be part of the overall story, and that would have kind of bogged it down more in the logistics of football rather than the story they were trying to get across in terms of, you know, bringing the team together and with this objective that they had. So it was kind of unnecessary, and it would have kind of bloated it, I think, a wee bit more than adding to the story. I don't think it needed to be added to in that sort of way.
Although it did make me chuckle that obviously they couldn't train on their pitch because it was like frozen, and then they went to train at their neighbours, their local rivals, and it had floodlights, it had seating, it had lines on the pitch, like it had all of these things that you would consider like a basic for football. It had nets, whereas they didn't have that. And that, as you say, it's not just about being like underdog. It's like they had nothing. They were starting completely from scratch. So it's a miracle we got to the end of this film. But one of the things that we've talked about that I think is, as I've said, why I love this film so much is the sense of humour. In particular, there's a couple of scenes when they are printing out the applications for the Icelandic FA Cup and he's running out of printer paper, and Carrie actually prints on the wrong side. So he's like, that's 50% transfer request, 50% jingle bells, which I thought was really funny. And then when he realises that someone's essentially done donuts on their frozen pitch, and all you hear, as you said, no subtitles required, it's just, Jesus Christ, because he's realised that the pitch is completely fucked. I just think the sense of humour in this is incredible. And as I've said, these guys are out doing like really hard manual jobs. Like the landscape is tough, their jobs are tough, the training is tough, and yet their sense of humour is so prevalent in all of this.
Yeah, I think it's part of the culture that if you don't have a sense of humour and are able to laugh things off, then it can be a very, very depressing place to actually exist in. So that's something as well that works within the whole sort of community angle as well, because you're sort of feeding your own soul, but you're also feeding the souls of those around you as well. You're helping other people out, and having a laugh with someone goes a long way to sort of bonding them together and everything as well. And yeah, gently taking the piss out of each other is something that I mean, let's face it, we do that as part of the Moviescramble team. We're constantly taking. You only need to look at the introductions to see the level of piss taking that actually goes on at my expense sometimes as well as yours. So I'm not saying it's a one-way street or anything. So yeah, it's very, very important, and it comes across, but it's very gentle. Even when he was talking about, like you say, when they went and trained on their neighbour's pitch, and he was saying, you know, there are local rivals, and then he says there are, you know, it's like our big brother, and he says, I can't believe I called him a big brother and everything. So it's just, you know, they bring in elements of humour into everything they do, and the father's the same. He's got this kind of nice, sunny outlook. He's always joking. He's always laughing.
Yeah.
All the way through the film, he's always making these wee remarks, and it's just wee sort of funny jibes and things like that. And it's really, really, it's heartwarming, I suppose, more than anything else.
Yeah, I think it also, the film really demonstrates the sort of openness of like Icelandic culture, because there's the moment where Carrie realizes that Gudni Bergson, who is the chairman of the Icelandic FA, his email and phone number is just available on the website, so he can go and set up a meeting with him, which I guess to us seems kind of mad, but in Icelandic culture, obviously that's not a big deal. You would go and have tea with the head of the Icelandic FA and you would discuss your hopes and dreams for your team. But even that is sort of wrapped up in humour, because he's like, oh, so if we have Freydis with a man with long hair who's quite feminine looking playing on the pitch. So even that is sort of wrapped up in humour. But I thought that was quite amazing that he would take the time to sort of sit down and chat to this amateur football team.
Yeah. You've got to remember, it's a small community. I mean, Iceland's what, 300,000-400,000 people maximum. So you can understand that, and they've always sort of fostered this image of being, fairly close knit and everything. And there's obviously, like you say, there's an openness that they're quite willing to interact with people. They're wanting to promote things like sport and football. And the way to do that is to make people available and to have that. I mean, that conversation was really nice, because obviously he was kind of pushing for trying to get Freydis involved. But the replies that he got were all kind of gentle. It wasn't like, no, you can't do that. It's not in the rules. And he's just kind of saying, we have rules. I don't think it's a very good idea at all. And he was like, fair enough. I tried, So it was, there was no confrontation at all. There was no confrontation at all throughout the film, and this kind of sort of cemented it. And usually, in order to make a good documentary, there has to be a bad guy, an antagonist. And it wasn't the local rival football team, who are 3 miles away from them. Which is unbelievable. The next big team are 3 miles away from them. And the fact that, like you say, you can get to the guy that's basically in charge of the whole organisation in the country. There was no drama in that sort of sense, and it worked perfectly well without that. It didn't need it. There was enough of a story there that they didn't have to embellish it and make sort of artificial conflict. It would have been unnecessary,
Yeah, and I think obviously it wouldn't have been authentic either, because as we've said, like that Icelandic culture is just, it's not in there. I think what the film does sort of give you instead of conflict is maybe sort of like lots of imperfections, I guess. So we talk about like the frozen pitches, their logo is missing from the FA Cup draw. There's lots of sort of mismatched shirts, like nobody quite has the right size. They're not all in the same kit. And I think it's that sort of maybe like lack of polish that I think maybe gives it that kind of other layer of sort of familiarity and homeliness as well, because you're like, oh, well, these guys could be us, because it's all a bit of a mishmash. And it's not, as you say, there's not like a villain instead.
Yeah, it's a very much a DIY approach to it, because they don't really know what they're doing to a certain extent. Well, yeah. I didn't want to make the comparison, but yes, I don't think you're 100% wrong there,
I think as well, the pacing is excellent. One of the things in particular, because I've been to see it a couple of times within the GFT, is that this is a film that really quite literally draws people out of their seats. The way that it's sort of, the way the story's put together, the way it's paced, but also just the final 20 minutes obviously is actually a football game. Now, the first time I saw this, and indeed the second time, there was people up out of their seats, like, shouting and cheering as if they were actually at a football match. Did you get that sense when you were watching it at home?
Yes, because it's very well done in terms of the actual match itself, because there's the whole build up to the match, and it reinforces the whole DIY aspect, because they're putting out like chairs for people to sit on.
Yeah, and it's like people's kitchen chairs.
Yeah, and there was people there with blankets and stuff sitting in the ground watching it. So it was very much the same sort of DIY approach. And then when they actually started the game, they started the game from the start of it and had the score up, and they had a timer as well of it actually starting. And you're thinking, is this team going to lose a goal in the first 30 seconds or something? Is it going to be this sort of anticlimax because they're going to get totally humped? And what happens is the team runs up to the other end of the pitch and they have a shot, but it's saved. And you're kind of going, whoa. So it's already building it up. It's adding a wee bit of tension to the actual game itself. And the way that it runs through the whole first half, and they hit the bar as well. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, when it's still 0-0. And then it cuts to, there's a TV news report, and it's talking about the games that are going on, and they're saying, remarkably, this game is still 0-0 and all that. And you're thinking, that's amazing, the fact that they would actually highlight that as well. So I really like that. And so they had a bit of pace about the actual match itself, and they switched it between sort of on-field action and the staff on the sidelines, and how they wso kind of holding their head in their hands at times, and they were all jumping about, and then we're going, is it half time yet, ref? Are we nearly there? so there was all this sort of stuff going on, and it changed the whole pacing of the film as well, because this was quite frantic, and there was a set beginning and end, whereas before it was here's a year's worth of us getting ready for all this. So I really enjoyed it. And there was that, real match tension, because let's face it, unless you'd actually really researched this and looked into it, you wouldn't know what the outcome was. I had no idea what the outcome was. The film sets it up so that whether they win, lose or draw, it doesn't actually matter, because it's how they got there and what they actually achieved by getting there. So the result is almost secondary, but you're still rooting for them. You're still wanting them to not be embarrassed. And by the fact that they get to half time and it's still respectable, they haven't I'm not really going to give very much away here at all, but they've performed well. They've done well, which is sort of paying off all the hard work that they've done. So I really liked that. I thought that was excellent the way they did that. And yes, you're right. You're kind of, you're urging them on as well, which is quite remarkable for people that you've only just met 45 minutes before on screen. So I thought it was good. Were you jumping up and down at any point?
Like I said, I have cried at this film more times than I can actually admit to. And do you know what was remarkable? The first time I went to see this at the festival, I jumped into a row because I was 2 screenings back to back. So I jumped into a wee row. There was 1 seat left, and I noticed the rest of the row had reserved seats on it. And I'm going, sitting there. I ended up sitting next to the entire football team the first time I went to see this. There was that knowledge that you're sitting next to the people that are actually, their lives are on screen. But everyone around me was just cheering. And I was up out my seat. And it's funny because they say in the film, you're treating this like a World Cup final, even though it's this tiny little football match. But that's exactly how it feels when you're watching it, because as you've said, you're so invested in these people that you've kind of only just met. And beyond that, I think that there's Carrie's sort of motivational speeches to the team are really lovely, because as you say, it's almost not about the win. It's just about the fact they've all come together and there's this community and they have this home game. But then you also have Vidar on the side of the pitch, who just seems to be laughing at everything that's going on. He's very chill. He's taking it all in his stride, and you are 1,000 times more stressed than he is, despite the fact that he's sort of coaching while Carrie's playing. So it's kind of a sort of, it just sicks you up in it, and you can't help but feel you want them to win, or you want them to score, or whatever it is. So it's really, really exciting. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it resonated so strongly at not just Glasgow, but all the film festivals that it's been to, is you do sort of get swept up in the drama of it all as it sort of moves towards this last game. And one of the things about it is it has these gorgeous sort of emotionally uplifting moments in it as well. It's not just about humour and the disasters and all the things that goes wrong. It is about this sort of uplift as well. And one of the things that I think is really nice is that the young boys and girls, they've basically said they've had nowhere to go or nothing to do. There's not really been that sort of activity. And so for them to have that, they obviously release a song as well, which they feature in the film, Postcode 360, which I absolutely love. I wish it could be on Spotify because I just think it's great. but there's just this sense that like it's kind of lifted the community together, and it's given the young people a sort of, I'm not saying that the town's got nothing going for it, because that's not fair. As you said, it's got a culture centre, for goodness sake, it's got a street art trail, it's got all these things going on, but it has given them this sort of vision for the future of like they could be this local team, which I think is pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, of course. Anything that brings community together and also sets something up for the future, because as Whitney says, the children are our future, so we do need to have children engaged and having a sort of sense of local and civic pride and all that. And that's a way of actually keeping people within the community, rather than they get to 17, 18 and they'll go to Reykjavik and go to university and live there as part of a sort of more metropolitan sort of setup. So, and it means that there's a future for the community as well. So you need all that people are involved in. There's something to be said for the fact that you pretty much know everybody in the town and you get on with them, and there's a sort of shared sense of, togetherness, if you like, with them all. So yes, I did like that, and that's when the idea of legacy comes into play as well. It's not just about this one thing; it's the fact that we are doing it for a particular reason, but there's a way on from this, and we can make sure that people are engaged with this for years to come. Yeah, it's not a bad thing at all. And it works. It's proven to work in all sorts of different places, this kind of idea of making sure that there's something for everybody. It's not just aimed at these ex-footballers, all these 40-year-old men and everything. You have to have a real mix, so there's like continuity more than anything else.
Yeah, because there's father and son within the team as well. Because I love their wee talking heads where they're taking the piss out of each other. He's like, "Oh, you can't run, old man," and all this sort of thing, and you won't last 50 minutes. And even that is just like that family is maybe that wee bit closer together because they have this shared activity as well. And I think that as much as this obviously is a documentary about football, it's definitely a documentary about people and community as well. And I think that's, again, probably what makes it resonate so much, is that it's just ordinary people, as I've said, with these kind of ordinary jobs, living their ordinary lives, but they've been brought together by something that kind of feels quite magical.
Yeah. It's something that they've kind of conjured out of nothing, really. And it's initially been just Carrie's idea of, well, this is something I'd like to do for my dad. So it's very singular, but it's kind of blossomed out from there as well. And like I say, it's involving all sorts of different people and pulling in different people. And it is very much families. It's not just one person from each. There is a whole father and son thing going on a couple of different places as well. And yeah, it's lovely. Really lovely.
It's, and without giving anything away, the end title cards, one will make you cry, the other one is so fucking hilarious. Like, and that's what I love about this film, is like, on the one hand you're like, oh my god, this is breaking my heart, and then 2 seconds later you're killing yourself laughing at something. So it's a bit of a sort of bittersweet kind of ending to it. Is there anything else you would like to mention about the home game? Oh, and also fun fact, the Icelandic word for home is heim, practically neighbours.
Yep. Well, yes, of course. I would like to just note the scene where they were awaiting the outcome of the draw for the first round of the FA Cup. Yeah. And they're all standing and sitting around a laptop, and they're going, have you updated it? Is it refreshing in real time and everything? And then they scroll down the whole list of it. And when they actually find out they've got a home game, because with cup draws, it's not guaranteed whether you're home and away. It's drawn out of a hat or whatever. So and that's what happened the previous time. They were drawn into the cup, but they were drawn away. So that's kind of it was never really explained what happened after that, why they never actually tried to do it again or anything like that. It was just kind of,
I think the 10-0 humping was probably
you're right. Yes. So the outcome of even the draw, the results of the draw and getting a home game, it was as if they had won the whole competition, because they were all jumping up and down, and it was just such a nice moment and everything. So I thought that was probably that kind of encapsulated the whole film. See if they just stopped the film there after they got that, you would still have been quite happy, because you'd obviously wanted to know what happened, but that was quite a nice sort of conclusion point as well, because you were saying they've kind of done it. They've got what they needed, and they can move forward from there, But yeah, I really like that. What about yourself? Is there anything else from you?
Just that you mentioned that really captures the spirit of the film, because one, he says you're not even on Google yet, so they're not even looking at the right page, and then obviously their logo's missing. That to me I absolutely love. I just really, there's so much about it that I could talk about, and the humor, the everyone being gathered round, the winters, the landscape, but I do really love the initial training sequences where you're just getting to know everyone. And as you say, they're talking about like their last defeat. They're all drinking, they're all eating like cheese or whatever. And then the next thing, it's just breathing out your arse at the local like gym. And that sound of trainers on the hard wooden floor, anyone that's done PE in the UK is very familiar with that squeak. And even that was just like so jarring, and they're all really unfit and they're all tackling each other. And then they've got this wee boy who's 15 and they're like, I don't know if you're even old enough to play, but we'll give you a go anyway. And it was just that kind of ramshackle approach to getting this team together. So yeah, I mean, as I say, there's so much about it that I absolutely love, but I just think it's such a, as you said, like lovely feels like a word that in other contexts would sound quite glib, but in this I do mean it in a sort of like heartwarming, humorous, like just really sort of aspirational kind of way.
Yeah, it's totally life affirming more than anything else. It is a nice story, and it's an unusual one to pick up awards, I would say, because usually it's something serious, something that has a message, or there's something that's been highlighted more horrific or serious. That's what tends to get the most viewers in terms of documentaries and things like that. So to have something like this, which is a reasonably straightforward story and it's told in a reasonably straightforward way, but there's a real heart to it, and that's like I say nice, but not in a twee way. Something to enjoy, something you can actually engage with.
And a little bit of light in amongst all the gloom.
Exactly, yes. For a country that doesn't get a particular amount of light during the winter,
Exactly. So finally, I guess the question to ask is, would you recommend this film?
Oh yeah, heartily recommend it. I think it's something that you can quite easily recommend and explain to people why they should watch it, and say you'll be surprised by the depth of this film and the fact that you'll become so engaged with a film that is about a football game. Ultimately, even for people who don't particularly like football, they will enjoy this film because it's not really, it doesn't center in that. It's all about people, and working together and everything. So heartily recommend it.
Me too. I have been recommending it for the past few years, so I'm just thrilled. As I said, in the UK, it's on Amazon Prime, Google Play, YouTube, and Apple iTunes. I believe you can rent it off of all of those platforms. So if you have any one of those, please go and seek it out. It's definitely going to leave you with the warm and fuzzies, I think is the right way of putting it. So as a result of talking about the Home Game, which obviously is a documentary, we thought we would pick some of our favourite documentaries that we have watched, which I think is quite an unusual wee turn. We're usually quite cinema and fiction focused on Moviescramble, so this will be nice to hear sort of other sides of viewing. So John, do you want to go first with your first pick?
Sure. Like you say, documentaries isn't something that we normally talk about, and when you suggested that, I thought, yeah, that's a good idea, brilliant, let's do that, and then had an immediate panic because I was kind of like, oh my god, what am I going to choose here? So I did have to do a wee bit of searching about, but I actually found a series of documentaries that I have actually seen and enjoyed as well. So the first one for myself is a documentary called The Great White Silence from 1924. This is a film about the Terra Nova expedition to the South Pole, which everyone will know about because it's the Captain Scott exhibition to reach the South Pole ahead of the Norwegian crew.
Keeping it Scandi.
Amundsen, who was put to the post in the North Pole. And as a result of getting put to the post and hearing that Scott was going to head to the South Pole, he basically turned around and headed back to try and do the South Pole. But one of the things with actually getting to the North Pole was it was undocumented. It was unverified because there was no images or someone there who could actually verify that they actually did get to it. So the British expedition took along a filmmaker called Herbert Poynting, who was a photographer and he's one of the sort of the early filmmakers, and they took him on the expedition basically down to New Zealand and then from New Zealand down to Antarctica, and he had his camera with him at all times taking these very sort of short form films, because obviously camera technology around about that time, there was very limited film that you could actually run through a camera, so it was very short form. You're talking about a minute, probably a minute and a half at the most, and he documented everything from New Zealand down to actually landing in Antarctica and the building of the base for base of operations there. He was supposed to be actually going with the party to the South Pole, but it was deemed to be too dangerous, so he didn't actually go there. So this film is set on the boat going down, and there's all the shots of the crew dancing and things like this and entertaining themselves and all that. And then like there's storms at sea, and they reach the floating ice in Antarctica, and how, like I say, how they set up. And he's taking all these films of like seals and penguins and all these sort of local area, and it's spectacular. Some of like sort of almost like these natural ice sculptures and everything. And the techniques that he used, there's a scene where he is filming the prow of the boat because it has this like, iron sort of enclosure around the front of it so it can break through ice. And he wanted to demonstrate how that actually worked. So basically they set up two planks at the side and formed a sort of an A shape. And he was hanging out, taking these with the hand cranking. And there's pictures of him doing this, and it's like really scary because it's obviously very low tech. And it's just he's connected to it by a rope. It's just like one single rope, and he's dangling out of the side, taking this. And he was doing things like getting right up close with like seals who had just given birth and everything like that as well. So they were obviously these sort of angry sort of mother seals and all that sort of stuff. So it's obviously. It's in black and white, and there's no sound. The version I have, it was restored by the BFI, and they've added a very sort of gentle soundtrack to it by a guy called Simon Fisher Turner, and they've pieced together all the film information that they could find. It was originally released in 1924, and Ponting actually went round places and actually presented it, almost like a Q&A sort of thing, and he took it all over the world. And to make it a wee bit more interesting, rather than just being straightforward black and white, he's tinted some of the screens the same way as Nosferatu. They tinted various scenes, and there's yellows and blues, and I think it's more sort of violets, and he's done that in order to sort of highlight some of the scenery and the things that's going on. And it's really good. And basically what you get is you get like maybe about 2 or 3 minutes of footage, and then there's the interstitial card that gives you an idea about what they're going to be doing next. There's quite a lot of humour and things like that in it as well, like talking about talking about the seals and how they're like they got up onto land and all this sort of stuff. And it's interesting. There's a wee dramatic bit where there's great white whales and they're chasing the seals in order to eat them. So there's wee things like that, and it's just this sort of not so much a travelogue, but it just basically it was an account of what actually happened, and it's quite poignant at the end because obviously one of the last shots is the team actually heading away from the base camp in order to go to the South Pole, and obviously they didn't return. Spoilers for something that happened in like 1911, but and this was something. It was something had never been seen before because nobody had seen what these guys actually do. They based everything around like news reports and everything. That's how you got your information. So to actually see film of these people like living their daily lives and what they did in order to sort of bring this sort of outpost together and all that, it's really, really fascinating. It's really
that sounds excellent. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's
and
really
also
good.
as well, I think when you see like old-fashioned photos, everyone's like very stoic. To actually see people like enjoying themselves and dancing and joking as well, you just don't picture people from that era doing any of that fun stuff, but they obviously do.
Yeah, it was all to keep themselves entertained. They had a football match actually out on the ice as well, and
No way.
it's like an old style thing where like when you'd see like maybe schoolboys playing football and just everybody's running towards the ball and and it was just like that. But the filmmaking itself was exceptional because he had a very good eye for getting a really good scene and everything. And you find with a lot of film from that time, it's quite jittery. It runs at different speeds because it's all hand cranked and everything. It doesn't look naturalistic, whereas this looked completely naturalistic. It was really, really clever. I don't know if they processed it
or
when they did the restore. I actually got a nice wee Blu-ray of it. That's what it was recommended to me a couple of years ago.
Cover.
Yeah, it's two in one. There's the Great White Silence, and there's another one which is the official record of Mallory and Irvin's 1924 expedition to Everest, which obviously wasn't the definitive one, but there's a lot in there, and there's a lot of like extras and stuff like that, and it's really good. Nice wee sort of double box set. Just some, and I'd forgotten I'd watched it, and I'd forgotten it, but when we talked about documentaries, I thought that's the first one. That's me.
Yeah.
That's me. Yep. So yourself.
So I will give some honourable shout-outs before I go on to my list, because I actually really struggled to pull together a list because I realised that I've actually seen quite a few documentaries. So the shout-outs go to The Imposter, Bowling for Columbine, Senna, My Name is Alfred Hitchcock, Riefenstahl, The Last Journey, and Hello Bookstore, which I would have put in a top 10 if I could have, obviously, but we're only doing a top 3. So my first pick is from 2021. It's called Storm Lake. It's directed by Jerry Rusius and Beth Levison. And it's about the struggles of a small town newspaper in Storm Lake, Iowa. The editor-in-chief is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist called Art Cullen, and it's him and his family that basically produced this bi-weekly publication called the Storm Lake Times. And obviously they are trying to keep it alive in amongst the sort of decline of hyper-local journalism and obviously the rise of digital media. And I just think it's really timely and poignant because obviously we live in a world where we do consume our news online and it's really hard to tell fact from fiction. But I think what this documentary really highlights is, especially in a place like America, which is so vast, the importance of these smaller local outlets, because for a lot of people within the community, the Storm Lake Times is the lifeline because it lets them know about, important things that are going on with harvests or roadworks or school closures or weather that they just wouldn't get from a sort of more national approach to news. So the documentary, as I said, focuses on the Cullen family. You've got Art, his wife Dolores, his son Tom, his brother John, and his sister-in-law Mary, and they all report on like basically everything. So they've got, everything from immigration to factory farming to national politics. And the film does feature appearances from political figures. You've got Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders and Jill Biden, who all appeared and visit the Storm Lake during the Iowa caucuses as well, because the area is actually very important in terms of swinging like local and national elections. So although it's a tiny little place, it does have this kind of role in shaping national discourse as well. So it's kind of a mix of talking heads and sort of behind the scenes footage. But I think more importantly, obviously, as I say, it demonstrates the sort of vital role of community journalism, not only in preserving democracy, but in having that community engagement as well. Like we talk about community in the home game and how everyone is really engaged. Like, as we know, people are very disillusioned with politics and life in general. And this newspaper sort of acts as a kind of beacon of hope in amongst all of this. So whilst it is kind of failing as a business in terms of it's a newspaper and it's not making money, it's a complete lifeline for the town's residents. And then sort of halfway through the documentary, we have the impact of COVID-19 as well, which sort of furthers that erosion of trust within media. So for them to have this accurate local reporting becomes even more important. And I just think that it's a bit like the home game, as I say, in the sense that there's a lot of community, but it's quite heartfelt as well, like without being twee. Like Art is a man who clearly has a passion for delivering news and delivering it accurately, no matter how small or silly the story might seem like maybe other journalists would turn their nose up at reporting some of the stuff that he thinks is really important for the community to know. So I think it's done the sort of festival circuit tour. I don't think it's ever sort of made it into cinemas, but if it's one that you ever come across, it's definitely worth watching, because as I say, we're all kind of aware that the news that we're getting nowadays is very sort of focused on one agenda or the other, depending on where you obtain your news. And for this small independent to be sort of fighting for its life and amongst all of that, I think is quite an interesting story. And Art himself is a very interesting, eccentric character. He kind of looks a wee bit like Einstein. You know, he's all like kind of checkered shirts and white bouffant hair and all this sort of thing. So he's just a kind of interesting guy. So yeah, that was my first pick.
Nice. That sounds really interesting. Where did you see it?
It was a screener I got a few years ago when I was doing reviews for Jump Cut online. And I jumped at the chance, no pun intended, for a lot of the documentaries, because I knew it would be ones that I wouldn't get to see elsewhere. And because this was newspaper based as well, I just thought it would be really, really interesting. But as I say, if you ever come across it, it's definitely worth the watch.
Nice. That sounds really good. I've never heard of it before, but yeah, I'll keep an eye out for it. That's excellent. My second choice is Hearts of Darkness, A Filmmaker's Apocalypse, which is a documentary film from 1991. It is the story of the making of Francis Ford Coppola's 1976 to 1979 film Apocalypse Now. It uses documentary footage which was shot and recorded by his wife at the time. Initially, she was doing this so just as part of her, she was a diarist. She did all these sort of things. So she was recording all this as reference material for her diaries more than anything else. But obviously the film turned out to be this epic of epicness, the making of it. What could go wrong did go wrong in it. And the footage that was actually taken covers the whole period from just before the inception of the first sort of shooting right through to the point where the film actually is shown at the Cannes Film Festival. And had to be defended at the Cannes Film Festival as well. So for anyone that doesn't know anything about the film itself, it was Francis Ford Coppola's sort of, was it opus magnus or whatever it's called?
Yeah. Magnum opus.
Which he had wanted to do initially in 1972. He wanted to adapt Joseph Conrad's book, Heart of Darkness, and set it in Vietnam. And he wanted to do it in 1972 during the Vietnam War in Vietnam. And he was kind of told, you will get
maybe
killed.
Logistical.
Yeah. It was like I think there was various people who were interviewed for this, and one of them said, I think it was George Lucas, that said, you will die. There is no question about it. You're not going to survive this. So basically all the documentary footage was taken by a guy called Fax Barr and George Hickenlooper, and they produced
fantastic name.
Yep, they produced this documentary based on all the original footage, and they added in talking heads as well with the main players. Coppola himself, Eleanor Coppola does voiceover as part of it, and you've got bits from Robert Duvall, Dennis Hopper, George Lucas, John Milius, and Martin Sheen. Martin Sheen famously had a heart attack during the production as well, so that's all gone into in great depth, and it basically chronicles the problems that they had during this. They was set in the Philippines, so it was like the Marcoses were involved in it as well, and they got their army, but the helicopters they had to be taken away at a minute's notice to go and fight the rebels and everything like that. And it was the way that the production spiraled out of control. There was weather issues and whole.
Oh, everybody was on drugs.
Did they
not dysentery as well at one point? Was that not going through?
Yeah, and basically it's a descent into madness, which kind of mirrors the film itself. And Coppola is actually on record. He was his wife was secretly recording him as well. They were having these sort of very intimate conversations, and he was saying, I've just had enough. I'm just going to put a gun in my mouth and that just end it all, because this is shit. I am just making shit, and everyone will know that I'm making. And it's just this crazy, crazy film. And it just, when you think it couldn't get any worse, it just sort of drops a wee bit more and all that. And it was just the fact that he was able to do it and get away with it. And he couldn't understand how he was given so much leverage. He thought, Plug's going to get pulled on this. And he'd put money of his own into it and like really sort of put himself in like deep financial straits, which again, obviously he did quite recently with
Megalopolis.
Yes, with very different results. But obviously Apocalypse Now came out. It was a very good film. But this is like the ultimate behind the scenes documentary without it being intentional, because all it does is it chronicles the events. It doesn't embellish them in a way. You would think it is in a way embellishing them, but it's not, because it's all laid down what the madness is and all the people who's around. I mean, for fuck's sake, Dennis Hopper, he was just completely out of it the whole time. And like Marlon Brando turning up and he's like about 4 stone overweight and he's decided how he's going to do the character, but just mumbling all the time and everything and covering himself in like green and black paints and everything. Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing piece of behind the scenes sort of cinema, and I don't think you would get that anymore. You certainly wouldn't get the access to something.
Oh no, and I don't think anyone would admit to half of the stuff that went wrong during that production. I used to have a great copy of Apocalypse Now that had that documentary as a separate disc.
Yep.
I do not know what's happened to it. I don't know if it's been lost in a house move or something,
Probably,
but I don't have it anymore. But I definitely have seen that documentary because it used to be part of a 2-disc copy of the film.
I've got one. It's called The Final Cut, and there's the Apocalypse Now film and then Apocalypse Now Redux.
That's what I had.
Yeah, and the third disc is the documentary. So there's like 2 versions of the film as well. So yeah, it's interesting as well, because there are like it's had a certain cultural impact. Some of the elements from this, like Community, for instance, the comedy show set in the community college. They had an episode called documentary filmmaking Redux, and it was about like the behind the scenes footage of like creating a commercial, and the director of the commercial, who's the principal of the community college, is slowly going mad, and it plays very much into that as well. And they've done it in like various things, like Tropic Thunder, for instance.
Yes,
takes elements from both Apocalypse Now and Hearts of Darkness as well. And there's an element of the Animaniacs, the Warner Brothers cartoon, called Hearts of Twilight, which was a parody of the documentary. Which is crazy, absolutely crazy. Yeah, really, really strange. But yes, it's nice when you obviously do a wee bit of research into these things and actually dig these wee sort of nuggets out as well, and how it's had this life of its own outside of the film, and then it's obviously been incorporated into the whole. This is a complete package. Here's the film, and here's what was behind.
All the shenanigans.
Shenanigans is the perfect word for it.
Oh dear. So my second pick will be no surprise to anyone who knows me well enough. It is a 2021 documentary directed by Luke Holland called Final Account. This is quite haunting, I think would be the word that you would use, documentary presenting the final testimonies of the last living generations of Germans who participated in or witnessed the atrocities of Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. So this film was over a decade in the making, and Luke Holland, the director, actually passed away shortly after completing the film as well, because it is quite an extensive piece of work. The film is built from more than 300 interviews conducted with former SS officers, Hitler Youth members, and sort of ordinary civilians, if you want to call them that, in inverted commas. So rather than obviously focusing on survivors or victims, I guess, it kind of turns the gaze the other way to those who were complicit. And I think that's what makes it so shocking, because some of these people you would say were maybe actively complicit, others, passively so. But what I think is quite terrifying about it is that these look like everyone's like wee grannies and grandpas, and they're sitting in their, you know, their kitschy sort of floral houses, and, you know, but they're looking back on a time in their life that should be, you know, riddled with darkness, but actually they're talking about how the Hitler Youth gave them, you know, free swimming, free clothes, new shoes, a bicycle, all of the stuff that their parents couldn't necessarily provide. Yeah. There is really shocking moments where there's a guy who, an older man who lives out in the countryside, and he is able to point to where he sold out Jews who'd escaped from Bergen-Belsen. And he was a young boy, and he was just told that that was the right thing to do. And as far as he's concerned, he still did the right thing, but he would point them out to the local SS, and they would obviously be, and his thing is, oh, I didn't know what happened to them once they get taken away. Well, I think you did. They probably get shot. So there's a real sort of disconnect in seeing these like doty, elderly looking people who are all sort of like liver spotted and grey haired, but they're telling you about these really horrible things that they participated in. There's obviously like they are asked these sort of like moral questions about like conformity, complicity, moral responsibility, and some of them really are grappling with their conscience still. You can see that, but others are completely unrepentant. Like the film is really quite shocking in the way that it ends with as I say, it's like somebody's grandpa opening up this kind of locked jewelry box that he's got in his house, and in it he's basically got like all these like Adolf Hitler memorabilia, swastikas, and he's like, yeah, this was the greatest time ever. You're going, what the fuck? So it's, I think what I think is quite interesting about it is it shows you how ordinary people to a certain extent can get swept up in something like this, like the propaganda machine, and they do become, as I've said, either actively or passively complicit in a regime like this. So you've got, as I say, the talking heads, but you've also got sort of like archival footage. You've got imagery of obviously concentration camps, Nazi rallies, and that sometimes is used to sort of juxtapose the niceties that these elderly people are talking about. You know, as I say, while they're reflecting by summer by the lake, you know, there's people getting rounded up and tattooed and their heads shaved. So I think it's interesting because it's not a documentary that necessarily points the finger at them. It just allows these subjects to do the talking themselves. It's not necessarily trying to shepherd them into any particular type of narrative. They are quite free to rationalise or justify as they see fit. So I think I read that this actually premiered at the Venice Film Festival in 2020, and obviously was highly praised there for its sort of emotional depth and historical significance. I've never, again, this is a jump cut online screener, I've never seen it in cinemas or anything like that, but it was a very, very shocking and uncomfortable watch, because as I say, these people just look like your nice wee like cute grannies or grandpas, and then they're like, oh yeah, there's where I picked off 3 Jews who were hiding in a barn. It's really quite difficult to watch in that sense, but very, very good.
Yeah, there are whole channels devoted to the Nazis and documentaries about them. And
I may or may not watch them.
Things, you know, obviously like National Geographic and the History Channel and all that, they were renowned for just being basically the Nazi channel, and it was everything Nazi superstructures and all the people involved. And when I was looking at some stuff, there was a couple of them. Obviously, there's the Riefenstahl documentary as well.
Great documentary, yeah.
She is talking about her experiences and justifying in a certain way her experience. And there's one on the BBC, an Albert Speer one as well, and how he apologised almost right away after the end of the Second World War. It was very contrite, but the part of the documentary there as well was he just saying that because he was just trying to avoid repercussions for what he was involved in and everything. So there's loads of these things out there, and because there is a lot of footage out there as well from these times, because the Nazis recorded everything.
Yeah.
You know, so they were very much of the opinion that these things had to be recorded for posterity, because it's the whole 1,000-year Reich thing, isn't it? More than anything else, they wanted their buildings and institutions and their whole philosophy to be recorded. So that's why, and obviously it didn't destroy everything that they actually made. So that's why a lot of this stuff is actually available, and it makes for compelling viewing. It really does. It's like, say, the way people are getting caught up in sort of like nationalism and getting caught up in almost like a cult-like behaviour, which I will speak about in a moment as well on mine. But yes, it's intriguing, and when it's put together in a way that it doesn't seem to show any sort of bias, it just puts these people on screen and lets them speak, and you make up your own mind. And like I say, it can be horrifying. It can be absolutely horrifying when you actually say, this person actually said that. And it's just part of who they are, and part of like the best time of their life. Old Adolf wasn't all that bad, that kind of thing. You can understand the mindset behind that, because he was able to provide stuff after the whole is it the Wehrmacht? The fall of the
Weimar government.
And like the hyperinflation and everything like that. People are using, there's famously people using banknotes to paper their walls because they couldn't afford it. It was cheaper to get banknotes than it was to get wallpaper and all this kind of thing, which is just totally crazy. And yeah, we do see it time and time again. But yes, it's interesting. Very good choice. Very good.
Thank you very much. Your last choice, then, you've got me intrigued with the mention of the C word.
Yes, my last choice is a 2016 documentary called Hypernormalization from filmmaker and writer Adam Curtis. He wrote and directed this. This is basically, it's a 2.5 hour documentary. It's currently on BBC. In fact, it's been on the BBC iPlayer since it came out. And it basically argues that following a crisis in 1975 in two specific locations, New York and Damascus, Western governments decided that the real world was too complex to explain and to manage. So therefore, they came up with a more simplified version of what life is like. And basically, this documentary goes from 1975 through to 2016, but it's especially relevant now because everything that they mentioned in the 2016 part of it is still happening today. So basically, it starts with basically New York City going into default in 1975, and that they didn't have the way that they raised taxes was that there was a lot of very sort of low income people who lived in New York City, and the services in New York City were getting to such a state that people were fed up with it. They left. A lot of low income people moved to other cities, so therefore the tax raising powers within New York dropped dramatically. They started borrowing money from banks and financial institutions, and it got to such a stage that the banks just says, we're not going to do this anymore. There was and one of the early scenes is the New York City mayor and the sort of financial people within New York City. They offer out bonds that you can buy in order for the, and it's like short-term and long-term bonds, and they get a return within a certain period, and obviously interest and all that. And they had this big meeting in order to do it, and the banks were supposed to turn up at 9 o'clock in order to start bidding for these bonds, and nobody turned up. So they were left with this oh shit moment, and they contacted the banks and said, what's happened? And it says, oh yeah, we'll be there this afternoon. That's fine. We'll be there at 2 o'clock. So they rearranged it for 2 o'clock. Banks didn't turn up again. So basically, the city went bankrupt almost overnight because they didn't have any money. So what the banks did was they swooped in and said, we will support you, but basically we run the city from now on. So all these financial institutions and banks, this is all documented. This isn't like Flight of Fancy. So in 1975, they took over and they invented this system called austerity. And what they did was they started sacking teachers, doctors, policemen, get rid of thousands of people. And this is where austerity came from. It was all to do with not balancing books and the financials. And they basically turned it into a city where it was for rich people rather than poor people. And that's still reflected in the way it's today. But at the same time in Damascus, there was talks ongoing between Henry Kissinger and the older Assad about having a treaty and sort of bringing the Middle East together. But what Kissinger was doing at the same time was he was having talks with other Arab nations so that they would come to some sort of compromise with Israel. Now, Syria was never going to come to a compromise with Israel. So he was trying this sort of divide and conquer. And the idea behind that was, if the Arab nations are not working together, then they're all at each other's throats, but then there's no consensus, so they're not a problem. But
oh my God, what is our obsession with going and stick? I know this is obviously the States, but we stick our nose in the Middle East.
Oh no, we were all involved. It was all the Western governments had a part to play in this. So Assad got really, really pissed off about it. So he basically took on sort of radical Iranians who had come up with this idea of sacrificing yourself for the greater good in the form of suicide bombings. Now, Islam does not allow you to kill yourself. You're allowed to injure yourself as part of a cause, but they extended that to say, well, the people that we are fighting against, it is a holy war and everything, so therefore Islam's okay with this. They basically twisted things around in order to do that. Syria said, that's a brilliant idea, we will finance you. And started financing all this. So that's basically the start of this 3-hour documentary. So it starts with that. It starts with New York. It starts with Donald Trump is involved in 1975 because he comes in as part of he's sort of seen as being a really good guy by the banks, and they start giving him lots of money to develop all this sort of stuff, which obviously
his dad, Fred C. Trump, is part of it. So there's a book that I read a while ago called Behold America. He was in trouble because in New York City, he was basically a slum landlord. He was renting out sub-acceptable apartments and he was obviously like prejudiced against like people of color, black people, people from the Middle East, all that sort of thing. He was in so much trouble because he was essentially like giving people rooms with no fucking running water and stuff like that, but extorting huge amounts of money out of them. And this was all in the 70s as well, because obviously in the 70s, that's where you get your sort of angry young men cinema, because New York was in a mess. Like there was rubbish not getting picked up, no electricity shortages, all that sort of thing. So it's interesting that this is kind of where that all like starts, or you can pinpoint it to.
Oh yeah, so there's the whole thing about Syria and their threat to the US, and it sort of goes from there, and it's all archival footage, and it's just this voiceover by Adam Curtis himself saying he puts forward his arguments for a lot of different things, and how there was the likes of America didn't want to attack Syria. They didn't want them to be the bad guys because they knew that if they did that, there would be like suicide bombings in every city in America. So they decided that Colonel Gaddafi was the main bad guy, and they made him the main bad guy for everything, despite the fact that they had no evidence that he was involved. And Colonel Gaddafi was like that. Brilliant. I'm the big bad. He played totally into it.
So he's not Syrian, he's fucking Libyan.
Yes, yeah, no, they blamed Libya for everything. See the Pan Am.
Oh, of course, the Lockerbie bombing.
Yeah. So that's blamed on Libya. For a year, it was investigated, and it was the Syrians. Everything led to Syria. That's who was involved. And then suddenly it flipped around, and they decided that it was Colonel Gaddafi did it. And Colonel Gaddafi eventually agreed that it was him that did it so that he could get sanctions lifted against his country, so he could become sort of more of this proper international statesman rather than the big bad. They based everything.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's a real mindfuck actually watching this thing. You have to actually watch it and then go back about 15 minutes to go, wait, did that actually happen? Because there's so many bits, and it plays into all that. It plays into the fact that obviously with computer networks and how that was originally this plane of existence where there wasn't any countries, it was without borders and everything, how that's been taken over by financial and institutions, been taken over by mega corporations. You're talking Facebook, X, all these sort of things, and how it's being used for evil more than anything. And all you hear is the siloed opinion. The algorithms work in such a way that you only hear what you want to hear based on your own stuff and all that. It is totally mental. It is nearly 3 hours, and you're just going, Jesus Christ, how can I not get this? And it finishes up with Russia and the way that the playbook that they introduced in the sort of the 2010s, basically Putin got in, it was an avant-garde theatre director to run his communications and to run various systems. And basically that meant that this guy was just doing all sorts of things. What he would do was he'd put money into like pro-Putin organizations. He'd put money into like sports. He'd put it into anti-Putin organizations. But he would tell them all, this is what he was doing. It wasn't a secret thing. He would tell them all. So there was like complete confusion about what was true and what was not true. So, and when they did something, then they would do something completely opposite or something completely random. And governments didn't know how to react to that. And then that playbook was taken by Donald Trump. He did exactly
chaos and confusion is his modus operandi, if you want to call it that.
There was during the primaries where all the candidates are talking, there's like 7 or 8 candidates, and they were saying about how there was a question to him about how he spends his money. And he says, well, see all these guys here? I've put money into all of their campaigns. I've backed them because I know that by giving them money in 2 or 3 years' time, when I need somebody, I can just say, I gave you all that money, you need to help me with this, and I get an instant response. So he's completely undermining the whole political system by doing that.
Oh my God, there are not enough drugs in the world to comprehend. And the thing is, like, you watch stuff like that, or you read, like, you know, I know you're reading the Looming Tower and stuff like that, and you read stuff or you watch it and you go, how the fuck are they getting away with that? And then you realise they've been getting away with it basically since governments or monarchies, as it used to be, ever existed. They've all been making it up as they go along to suit themselves. And as long as you keep the masses, in inverted commas, as I said, in a state of confusion, then it's a bit like just now in the UK, everyone's upset about, you know, people on boats, on small boats, or trans people, instead of being upset at the fact that they can't afford bread and milk, because it's this, you know, chaos and distraction, as opposed to allowing you to focus on the real issues that are not being delivered upon.
Yep. Well, the big thing, obviously, the title hypernormalization was coined in the 1970s. It was a Soviet author that did it.
Of course
and
it was.
It was taken up within the Soviet Union because in the 70s and the 80s, everyone within the Soviet Union knew that the system didn't work. It was completely broken. And rather than doing anything about it, they all accepted it because they all felt powerless, because how do you fix something as massive as that? So it got to the stage where it became the norm. It became a hyper norm. That's what the phrase, because it was something that everybody knew. And by doing that, it was like sort of feeding into the fact that people didn't trust anything anymore. There's a whole bit as well about how the Americans basically engineered conspiracy theories like Area 51 and had it leaked. They deliberately leaked it to people that were susceptible to actually doing these things. And it was to sort of destabilize people and have them, you know, it's the same idea when we're watching like an Alfred Hitchcock film or something, and there's something going on in the background, there's something really important going on, but you're looking in the wrong place. It's misdirection. But and they do that because they think there's a gain from it. But what actually happens is it eventually implodes the whole system with the fall of the Berlin Wall and everything. And nobody predicted that. Western governments didn't predict it. Reporters, it just happened really, really quickly. And it was a real shock to everybody because the whole narrative was that this was a very powerful enemy. It wasn't imploding from like problems that were going on for 20 and 30 years. It was, these are the enemy. This is why we've got all nuclear weapons, you know? So the fact that it all failed and it was a real surprise was a failure in their simplified system of, here's the bad guy, this is what we're doing in order to stop the bad guy. And it's crazy. You will be tearing your hair out watching this thing, but I would urge you to watch it.
Oh, I'm absolutely going to. I love stuff like that makes you sort of like angry, frustrated, a little bit teary, and then going, well, I'll not be able to sleep for the night because you fall down that rabbit hole, don't you, of looking stuff up.
There's another one. There's another one I should say just before that called Bitter Lake. It's the same guy, and it's all about militant Islam. So watch that afterwards, and that's another one. It's a good couple hours long. So, but yes, it's scary stuff. They're all on. All his stuff seems to be on iPlayer. I think it was commissioned by the BBC, but it's a film rather than a series. So yes, sorry for interrupting.
No, all I was going to say is that my last pick is not going to be anywhere near as exciting or as mind-boggling as that, for sure. It's a slightly more straightforward biopic, I guess, a documentary. It's called Bombshell, and it's the Hedy Lamarr story. So this is from 2017, made by director Alexandra Dean, and it's obviously a biographical documentary that sort of tries to reclaim her legacy a little bit. You know, she's not just the glamorous Hollywood actress, but she actually was, you know, a brilliant inventor whose work laid the foundation for what we would call like modern wireless communication. So it's a mix of archival footage, interviews, and newly discovered audio recordings of Hedy Lamarr herself. So she was born Hedwig Keisler in Austria, and she gained notoriety for her role in the controversial film Ecstasy from 1933, where she was seen to be enjoying herself a wee bit too much for the censorship codes at that particular time. But she also had a very sort of controlling and manipulative marriage at that particular moment in her life. She was married to a munitions tycoon, and she had to flee that marriage, and then obviously she fled Nazi-occupied Europe as well. So in Hollywood, she obviously was one of the biggest stars of the 1940s. She was incredibly iconic. She was often dubbed the most beautiful woman in the world. But she was actually a self-taught inventor with a very keen interest in science and engineering. So during World War II, she collaborated with the composer George Antheil to develop a frequency hopping communication system, which was intended to prevent torpedo jamming. And though the US Navy dismissed the invention at the time because she was just a silly little woman, it later became the basis for technologies like Wi-Fi, GPS, and Bluetooth. So the film really goes into basically how her contributions were completely overlooked because she was seen as like too beautiful to also be intelligent. And obviously she was a woman as well. So, you know, what would she know about, you know, war, for example? And she was basically reduced to selling her war bonds in order to make money because her inventions obviously didn't make any money at the time. So you have that kind of like exciting, you know, inventor, you know, moment in her life, but then afterwards she became very reclusive because she wasn't taken seriously and her career had sort of come to a halt. So she had a lot of failed marriages, and she had a cosmetic surgery addiction as well because she was basically trying to reclaim her acting career, but she ended up with botched cosmetic surgery, which left her, you know, not unlike looking like kind of like almost like that sort of like lumpy face kind of way, very like the filler and Botox, etc., were not used the way that they are used now. So it was very uneven, it was very distracting. So she completely became a recluse and withdrew into herself. So it's quite a sad story in a sense that she had all this potential, both in her acting career, because, you know, she was obviously very talented and she was extraordinarily beautiful, but in this sort of latter stage in her life when she wanted to be taken seriously as, you know, the inventor, she wasn't. And of course, her work was then claimed by men who said that they had invented it as well. And she was, you know, not given any sort of like royalties or anything for having participated in the discovery of this technology. So she really was left with nothing and quite a sort of pathetic looking soul towards the end of her life. So for me, it was just really interesting because she obviously is a very iconic figure in Hollywood, but also she does have this very sort of scientific and inventory background to her that not a lot of people might know about. But everything basically that we use now, including the way we're communicating with each other, is thanks to her brain, and just the fact that she was left with nothing. And it's that kind of infuriating way where there's so many women throughout history who've been part of these big discoveries, but they've been left with obviously their name isn't on the sort of scientific paper, or whatever if you want to call it. So it's really well shot. As I say, it's a mix of sort of like archival footage and talking heads, and they have found sort of clips of her speaking as well. And it's just a kind of like bittersweet story of how incredible and amazing she was, but how sad and lonely she ended up because nobody was willing to take her seriously in either of the fields that she excelled in. So I had that on DVD. I don't know if it's on any particular streaming platform. It's just a DVD that I picked up the odd time because the front cover is her looking absolutely stunning. So I was drawn by that initially. But if you can get a hold of it, it is definitely worth the watch because it's quite incredible what she achieved in her lifetime, and just unfortunate that she was never recognised for it.
Nice. I have not seen this film. I didn't even know it existed, to be honest, which is a bit of a shame because it sounds excellent. It sounds as if it would be really good. I'm having a wee look to see if it is actually available.
feel like it maybe was on like iPlayer or something at one point, but as I say, it was just a DVD that I picked up on a.
Yeah, it's available to rent in all the usual places.
Ah, right, okay, yeah. Well, so it's definitely worth looking for. Yeah.
Yep. Aye. Yeah, so it's only like £3 or something on like Amazon and Apple TV and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, make it that a watch.
£3 well spent. Well, I'll definitely be downloading yours and ready to trip Boz basically how the system's all rigged against us, So, but if you, dear listeners, have any documentaries that you would like to recommend to us, either just to chat about or just for us to watch, we would love to hear from you. We are on all of the usual social channels, including YouTube and Blue Sky, if you want to give us a follow at Moviescramble. You can also send John an email. We have a specific podcast email address, which is podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. But until next time, it is goodbye from me. Bye.
Bye.